Want to do?
You.
It looks like we're going. The red light's blinking. So just from a courtesy perspective, just to reiterate, we are recording it. So there's a protocol to make sure that everyone's well aware that that's happening. So, and as with all of our trainings, we'll post these on the there's probably 3 or 4 pages that are intentional to help support people in a variety of ways. But one of them is a page that Jackie Takis has pulled recently together, which is our staff faculty affairs. And so anything to do with planning and reporting and so forth will be put there. And in addition to that, we're starting a professional development page where we'll have these webinars, the recordings posted and so forth. So that'll be there. But also, just as a housekeeping thing, so I'll share with you that when we're done, our intent is we will send the link to the recording out to the whole organization, but we'll also send directly to you all. And then coupled with that is a PDF of the slide set that we're going to reference today. In the slide set, there's several things that I've captured from documents that we would like you to have, and we will share those documents with you also. So I speak to that because when I share just a portion of the document, there's some that have multiple links and so forth. No need to click on them, no need to write them down, no scribing is needed because we will send you all of that material in addition to the recording. So that was a good segue in. So let me, I'm gonna go to share, and then this is gonna work perfectly fine. That looks like that's starting, hallelujah. Going to start from the beginning. That's always easiest. Whoops. Oh well, that was just a good lead in. So anyway, just to reaffirm our topic, program planning with impacts in mind. So let's go ahead and hop to the next slide. And I just want to give a quick overview again of the various components. So as was mentioned, we'll be covering kind of 4 dominant areas. As you think about planning programs that we want to be deliberate to reach impacts with, it's often important and significant to start with conducting assessments. So we're going to take a little bit of time to talk through some ideas associated with that, particularly when we have newer hires that come in. It's often one of the first things that folks would do is to conduct an assessment in their county, in their community, in our city. But we may have individuals that have worked for us for a period of time, but maybe there's a new and emerging issue that's come forward. And as an organization, we need to address that issue for our state and for the constituents. In order to do that, though, we need to really figure out where we at with that, so then we can figure out where we need to get to and measure those 2 differences. And so we shouldn't assume it's just for brand new folks. So we want to speak to that. We're also going to target directly some conversation around making certain that the major programming that you're working on aligns with the organization's priorities, which couple with the college's initiatives as well. So we'll hone in on that. That's when we're going to go to UME Answers, because there's about 4 places that help keep us in line with that. One is we have the program plan that the organization has that the director sent out about a month ago. So we'll take a look at that, but then we also go to our planning site. And as we do that, you'll know as you develop your individual extension plan, your IEP, it helps guide us because all of those initiatives and priorities are listed, and you have to decide which one am I focused on. So it really causes us to pause and think about, and what I plan, I can't even say that's not even grammatically correct, is what I am planning. I'm still not sure that's right, but I'm going with it. Does that align with the major priorities or the initiatives that we have? And so we just need to make sure that all of those things line up. So we'll take some time to speak about that. Then we'll transition into the whole planning process of leading to impacts, which is our logic model, a progression that leads to impacts so that we can demonstrate that we had some positive effect on whatever issue it is that we're trying to address. I thought it would be advantageous also to chat a bit about the scholarly contribution that all of us are expected to make as faculty members. And as we do that, then we want to make certain that we're planning for impacts to be significant as part of that. Jackie Takis, who works with the director to really coordinate our promotion and tenure process, hopefully we'll be able to hop on around that time just to give a nod to the significance of that when you think about promotion, whether you're in a professional track position or in a tenure track position. And then, of course, this is at the end of that, then that's when we'll transition to each of you go into your respective program leaders, and they'll spend some time with you in their individual room. So let's think about this a second. Old school saying, but when you think about the extension program development model, the model of extension programming, planning is significant around that. It's one of the elements that must be intentional as we think about major concerning issues in whatever area of the organization we work in, and whatever part of the state or a particular community, whatever it is, there's something that we need to address. That's what has, of course, been the mainstay of our organization for 100+ years. And so as you think about that, then we have to be very deliberate about the program that we plan to address that particular issue. So when I say failing to plan is planning to fail, if in fact any of us just run around haphazardly and we don't really think through the direction that we're going, and does it align with our initiatives and core mission? Is it something that at the end we'll be able to measure and we'll be able to tell our funders, our constituents, the people that live in our communities, listen, this is what we were able to accomplish in the last 5 years by 2025. And so in order to do that, we have to be intentional about planning. So I just wanted to underscore that. I also say this quite frequently, and I'll say it again, start with the end in mind. So the organization last year was deliberate about creating a plan where we would shoot for 2025. I'm sorry for a quick pause. So Chenzi, if you wouldn't mind, Albert Lewis has emailed me indicating that he's having a little trouble with the login. So Chenzi, if you don't mind, just email Albert Lewis. He's in Baltimore City, the login for the presentation. Thanks. So as an organization, we made a plan that by 2025, we will have hopefully reached some certain accomplished goals. And so we revamped our individual extension plan so that it was structured where we had a 5-year plan. And so we, any of us, all of you on the call or the Zoom here today, and as an organization, you need to think about, where do I want to be by 2025? What significant impact or outcome do I hope to accomplish by that time? And then of course you work your way backward. So as the saying goes, it's like eating an elephant, you know, one bite at a time. And so even though we want to get to something by 2025, what will we have done in 2020? What will we do in 2021, which is what you're doing right now? You're making a plan for the 2021 IEP. Often it's typically just the outputs that are adjusted, but with the whole COVID-19 situation and the adjustment in programmatic delivery, you know, there may be some other things that you need to work on. But generally, we're leading toward these significant goals. So that's where you need to start. So make yourself a big 2025. Where do I want to be where I'm able to demonstrate and show that I've had significant outcomes that have led to some impact? Now, I do want to pause on that before we move to the next component, because I observe that sometimes many of us get nervous about that, because what if we're not able to show significant impact? And let's say our concern in Maryland was, let's say, childhood obesity. And our hope is that our impact will be that the percentage of childhood obesity goes down. That's what we hope to happen. And so then every year I'm doing something to work against that. I'm doing nutrition programs, I'm doing workshops, I'm doing curriculum, I'm developing fact sheets. I mean, everything that we're doing that's leading toward that. But how would you measure that you actually were able to get the incidences of childhood obesity to go down? And it might just be a percentage, a small percentage, because it's such a huge concern. That seems daunting and overwhelming to folks, and I get that. So you plug in your program here, whatever it happened to. Maybe it's phosphorus load in the bay. Maybe it's leadership skills in children. You know, it could be issues associated with, our agricultural production. And so how will you make that impact? So I draw attention to that because it can become a little daunting. And as we speak to that, the reality is, though, that you've developed a plan, you've worked toward outcomes, and the impact that you make may not come at that specific point, but it may be, for instance, if you work with children, it may be when they're adults that we see the impact of that and so forth. So what you can do, though, is create a little bit of a bridge where you think about what are the societal indicating concerns that we have, and use those measurements to be able to theorize what your outcomes will lead to an impact around, and so forth. So don't let that overwhelm you, that by 2025, we're not going to have saved the world, but we will more likely have made, some significant, deliberate, programmatic approach that leads to some outcomes that then would lead to impacts. So I'm going to hop to the next slide and go ahead and jump into conducting assessments. And I'm starting my clock because I tend to chase rabbits, y'all, if you didn't know that about me yet. And so I want to make sure that as I speak to this, that I'm staying a little more mindful of time, or continually mindful of time. How's that? So when we speak about conducting assessments, now, y'all, this is a workshop in and of itself, an all-day workshop in and of itself about conducting assessments. So I spoke about maybe there's a concern that we have in our state, and we as an organization, University of Maryland Extension, want to address it. And so you begin to think about, how will I make a significant impact? How will I lead to outcomes? And I need to plan accordingly and so forth. So you start with, where you want to get, but the other thing, though, and the other end of that continuum is we need to know where we're starting. What is our baseline? So assessments are significantly important to figure out where are we at now before we can figure out where we want to go to. So as you do that, the thing that we live in an amazing time that we live in, particularly associated with the use of technology and the opportunity to access other locations for data, for other folks that we could partner with that have done studies and so forth, is readily available to us. Now, obviously, as a land-grant institution, we have to be cautious about what secondary data we access. Who did it come from? Is it, there's some confidence, some rigor behind that data and so forth. And so this is one of those don't panic and write down all these links thing. So we will provide you with a sheet that has a number of secondary data sources that we will provide to you, as I said, when we email those out, just as a few suggestions as you think about where we are now. So as a light example, if I were, let's pick on the childhood obesity piece again. If I were to, if I wanted to address that as a primary area of focus for me, a large scale program, then I would go to these areas to find out where are we at right now? What are those incidences? Many, many data sources that can provide that. So we just wanted to speak to that as you, again, plan with the end in mind, and you think about impacts and trying to figure out where you're at now, which is that situation statement in your IEP that you write. You just share it. This is where we're at. So this is a good location that you can go to. So this will be provided to you. It'll be an 8.5 by 11 sheet, kind of a regular printed document, and the whole thing is full. So I just grabbed a little bit of it to draw attention to it for you. So another idea about conducting assessments, and again, this is coming to you also, it's actually a 3-page document that gives some suggestions for conducting assessments. But the thing that I wanted to speak to is, and the reason that I grabbed this is, look at this first one, generating a list of associations in your community or your county, these groups that we could possibly bring together that pursue shared interests, really doing an inventory. Maybe you could start with your steering committee, the Extension Advisory Council. Maybe there's some area to say, hey, this is a concern in our community, in our county. This is where I would like to focus my programming on. You counsel with your program leader, you counsel with your area extension director or whoever's in your supervision line, and you come up with the yep, that's the direction we think we need to go. But that feedback, when I'm saying assessment, some is you're looking for data, you're looking for concerning points and so forth, but also there's the opportunity to counsel with folks that can give advice to us as it relates to us moving forward. So as you do that, we did that as an organization on a large scale. That was when we worked on our strategic plan. We brought together groups of folk that have ties to our communities. It was called Appreciative Inquiry, and we brought them together. We asked them questions about what were concerns to them. And from that data, then that led to the priorities that we have as an organization. So this is just some ideas about conducting assessments, again, where you would go and bring some groups of folks together. The next thing should just be maybe kind of 4 things to think about. When we talk about community mapping, when you think about assessments, one of the things that I encourage, especially newer faculty, to do, let's pick on you're a county educator, we're a field-based educator. So the county you go to, you're new, maybe you weren't raised up around there, you don't particularly know it quite as well. So we have this exercise when we do this in person where we literally draw on newsprint a drawing of the county. And then we begin to map out all of the assets that are in that county. And so you could start with, where are my communities? And you're putting communities. And then what are some support components in those communities? Maybe there's some folks that we have cooperative relationships with. Maybe I have a volunteer who lives in that community who knows the mayor and so forth. So you just begin to map out this community. The reason we're doing that is when you think about planning for impacts, we want to make sure we're successful, and we want to draw on all the assets that we have in a particular community, because that's going to hopefully lead to success. One, they can provide us feedback to tell us these are the concerns we have in our community. Secondly, they can help us carry them out, so it's more likely we would be successful. When I was in a program leader role as a state 4-H program leader, I would tell my folks, as they thought about where do we want to go start a new 4-H club, and I would tell them, what part of the county is there a void? Maybe it's the western part of the northwest part of the county. We don't have any 4-H clubs there, so I want to start one. Well, then I go, okay, well, where is there a community that we could meet at? Is there something that would bring them together? Is there a school? Maybe there's a faith-based group that has that similar concern. And anyway, at the end of all of that, they said there's really nowhere for us to be able to pull that together. Then I would say, then maybe that's not the best direction we need to take. Where might else we invest our energy in, recognizing though that void is still there. So how are we still going to connect those kids to what's available if there's nowhere truly that we can, the reason I'm saying this is you have to take a hard look at it's not a goal if the goal can't be accomplished. And so if there are outliers that are going to make that improbable, then you may need to make a different decision. So that community mapping is very important. I mentioned baseline studies, quite significant. Where are we now and where do we need to go? Chenzi can work with you on that as an expert in survey design and so forth. Many educators come to her and our former colleague, Teresa McCoy, to do baseline studies. I mentioned about community needs assessment, very important. Again, you ask the community, sometimes we do that with focus groups. And it's always important, don't do to or for the people, do with the people. So with a little bit of humor, I think was swoop into a community and we say, we're from the government and we're here to help. And yet we never really asked them what their needs were or what they wanted and how we could partner together. So focus groups are really important when conducting assessments to really sort out the critical issues that's really been, for the most part, well identified based on priority areas and so forth. But then when you begin to ask yourself, as an educator, what program will I offer to hopefully make some impact against that, then that's where these focus groups can come in, because they can give us excellent feedback on how we might move ourselves forward. So we also wanted to touch, before we transition on to the priority areas, and the, sorry, a text came in. I offered people a chance to text if they were having trouble, but it's not related to this specifically. So we always want to make sure that we're aligning our priorities and our initiatives. So we have available to us the UME program plan that was just, I mentioned that the director sent out just a few weeks ago. Our program leaders were significantly principled in pulling that together. Lots of counsel back and forth with you all, with our faculty and so forth about the direction we would want to go. Furthermore, with our state extension advisory committee and so forth. And they brought all of that together and then worked toward aligning UME's priorities that match with our strategized plan. They aligned with the college's initiatives, and then we came back with the program plan. We have our strategic plan that I've been referencing that is on UME Answers, and then we have our IEP system. So I'm going to stop sharing this because this is a thing I just wanted to draw attention to very quickly so that you would know what I was speaking about. So hopefully this will work. Brad was kind enough to help me, so it should work splendidly. So you should be seeing our UME program plan. And if you're not, I'll count on someone coming off mute and shouting out. But I'm just going to scooch through this. Scooch, my goodness, that's you can tell where I'm from. Scooch down our programmatic plan. And so the reason I'm showing this again is as you're thinking about large-scale planning and the priorities, the initiatives, the concerning points that we have, many of us intuitively already really know this because we work in this area. We talk with people all the time. We have lots of conversations with our colleagues and so forth. So intuitively we have that. But to make certain that we're aligning well with the priority areas, then that's white space on purpose. Then we want to make sure that we double check that. So as mentioned, here's our program leaders, and Dr. Hansen sent this out. And so we just start by program areas. So Dr. Jarboe, who's on the call today, he'll be joining our Ag and Food Systems group here in a little bit. Spoke with, what are the program descriptions? We spoke to mission and vision. And this is where we begin to get into priority areas. So here's our priorities. Here's our strategic goals in our Ag program that are listed. This is where we want to be, and this is the direction we want to go by 2025. There's some other components here that are highlighted. So if I were an Ag and Food Systems educator and I'm planning for the future, I'm developing my programmatic plan, the large scale, and I want to make sure that I have impacts to demonstrate that I had some outcomes that were significant, I would measure them against this or bounce them up against this. This is the area I would look to make sure that what I'm doing, I find it in here, that these are concerns we have. And so I'm going to create a program to address these. I'm just going to keep rolling because we're going to look at these in 2 or 3 different areas. Hallmarks of success, that's really, where do we want to be in 2025? We want to be able to look back and say, this is where we started and here's where we're at now. So it's important that we're all familiar with that. In 4-H youth development, just as a quick example, of course, mission and vision, we have some priority areas that 4-H bounces against. Everything they do is measured within these priority areas. And the way that they do that is they carry that out with clubs, high quality short-term experiences, and development of practitioners, including educators and volunteers. So if you're working in short-term experiences and you want to do a program that's going to maybe increase science-ready workforce skills in children, well, then you look up here, is that a priority for us? You bet it is. It's identified there. So, and then these are the strategic goals. So I want to make sure that I am balanced well, of course, with family consumer science. Similarly, very clear goals and missions, priority areas, and of course, in my head, I can say from an FCS perspective that it's healthy living at every stage of life, and you think about a variety of different implications that we've had over the years. There's been some more intentionality that Jen He has brought forward, working with the team there. So those are identified, and then of course there's strategic goals. So again, this is a location that you can come to make sure that we're on point. And then of course our environmental science, our environment and natural resource, as well as our Sea Grant program. Here's the hallmarks of success for FCS. and then environmental science has these outlined as well. So whatever you're working in, whether it's with Master Gardeners, or you're working in the Bay related program or watershed or whatever it happens to be,
program.
working in with that. Oops, somebody's mic's off. I can hear them in the background. So just double check that our mics are muted.
Jeff, I'm going to check those mics. Can we ask a quick favor? Can you let us know again the person who emailed you who couldn't get in?
Albert Lewis.
Thank you so much.
Yep, sure. So, and then of course, there's multiple parts in our environmental and natural resource program. Of course, forestry is huge in our state, particularly as you get out west and so forth. So there's just some nods to that. So I'm going to stop sharing that, but just wanted to underscore that that was available. Now, the other thing I wanted to quickly share was that oh, I'm double clicking it like that's going to make it share. Okay, here we go. On UME Answers, I mentioned about the faculty and staff affairs page. So I highlighted that on Admin Monday. Jackie Takis has been quite principled in working with that. But if you went to UME Answers, and again, I can never remember the thing, so I just type in a search, UME Answers, boom, it pops up, wiki, I click on it, and of course we highlighted it the other day. But within it, just click on, here's the section on faculty staff affairs. The reason we're going here is I want to draw attention to, then I would click on annual reporting. I'm getting to our IEP, faculty IEP, and then I want to pretend like I'm going to start one. It might make me log in. We'll see what happens. The good news is I'd already done that and it remembered me, hallelujah. So just as you're currently doing, if you wanted to develop your IEP, then you would, select yours. The reason I'm doing this is, well, ag is here, so we'll just start with that one, or because it's most readily available. So, oh my gosh, my face is hiding the little ad. I'm going to scooch it over here to the left. So I come in, I want to add a new item. This isn't an IEP training. What I'm getting to is I want to showcase that, as we move along together, damn, I keep covering up where I need to be. As we am working toward planning that will lead hopefully to outcomes and impacts that align with our priorities. As an organization, we've been quite deliberate about keeping us all in check, which means as you go in to put in your plans, the priorities that were listed over in the program plan, you have to begin to select those. So this is just the ag example. All three other program areas have this in your IEP development as well. And so it will help guide us because you're going to have to select out of these, what percentage of time, how are you distributing your time in the ag program among these? Then as you begin to work your way down, then you'll note that there's major program areas and so forth. So it helps guide us. It helps keep us focused. So it's this, if I were to open the FCS one, if I were to open 4-H, if I were to open environment, ENR and Sea Grant, those are there, and our Sea Grant elements are also, those components are there because we have to demonstrate, measure that we've had accomplishment against that we report back to our funders. So as an organization, then we make certain that we're all headed in the same direction. We're filling out similar instruments of survey and evaluation that can aggregate together into a central report. And furthermore, our UMERS, University of Maryland, a reporting system, then it is structured where the reporting that you're giving is aligning with those federal initiatives and so forth. So when you go in, so again, I speak to this because I want to be sure to get to the logic model piece. I'm going to not go into the other areas, but I just want to, even though I clicked on ag because it was right there with us, readily available, I just want to draw attention that the other three areas have that level of detail. So it helps keep us all organized when we think about the direction that we're going and so forth, that we're aligning with these priorities and the initiatives that we have. So three major ways that help keep us all in check. Now, the reality though is because, we are deliberate about hiring extraordinarily talented individuals who are thoughtful and they are innovative and they have great energy, and as such, it's really broad as to what you plan, what you plan to carry out. It's really, we give you the construct, the initiatives, the priorities, and so forth. You know what the concerning points are, and then you come back together and you begin to design a program that will address that. So the next thing should be about our transition. I'm not sure why that didn't go. There we go. In a second, we're going to transition over to Dr. Wang. But what I want to say is, in extension, we often use the term program. Well, we use the term program all the time. And there's really two kind of thoughts about a program. One is what we reference as a big P program. Like, you may have a large programmatic emphasis that you're concentrated around. You actually, over the course of time, more likely will develop a statewide reputation around that program. And furthermore, you'll more likely develop a national reputation around that program because of the scholarly work that we do, and we share that. So that's a big P. And we'll turn the term, use the term, maybe you have 3 major programmatic things that you concentrate on. And then under that, within that, you might carry out a number of sessions and series that lead to 2025, where you'll be able to measure that effect. So we often call that a program. I mean, I may be headed out the door and I may holler out, oh, I'm going over to such and such, I'm going to do a program. And so that's, we could interject maybe the presentation, I'm going to teach a class and so forth, but we often use the term, we're going to go do a program. So the reason I speak to that is that that's a little P program. So you have a big program that you're doing that's leading to some significant hopeful outcome that will make an impact in our state. And then under it, you're doing multiple small P programs that lead up to that, that you map out in order to reach that. And so to map that out, it's very important that we draw on a logical approach that would lead to these major outcomes and so forth. So that is what Chenzi is going to be kind enough to share with us. I stopped my screen, she'll start hers, and she'll get into logic model development. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. So thank you very much, Jeff, for all, this detailed and useful information. So just, I just really want to pause here a little bit. Is anyone, does anyone have any questions about what, Jeff just talked about? Because we just want to, have a little bit time for our participants to digest, what Jeff just talked about, because they're very important information. I cannot say. I mean, if you have any questions, you could just write in the chat box, or you could just unmute yourself.
Chenzi, in the chat, I'm getting a nope, we're all good, and so forth.
Oh, good. Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks.
So can everybody see my screen here? Great. Okay, wait a second. So, my dearest extension colleagues, my name is Chenzi Wang, and I'm the coordinator of program development and evaluation. So for some new, because I, actually saw some new names, from the participants list. So if you are new to our extension and you don't know me yet, I just want to introduce a little bit about myself. My job actually to help our extension faculty members with their program evaluation and the research projects on participants' learning outcomes and program impact. So this part actually in our extension and evaluation world, we call this human subject research projects. So if you have any questions regarding how to build your program, how to build your research, how to actually have your evaluation plan or your institutional review board, IRB applications, your data collection, analysis and report writing. If you have any questions about that, just welcome to let me know, and I would like to help you with that. And also, I'm just looking forward, to work with all of you in the near future. So, okay. So at this moment, I think you already learned from Jeff, right, how to assess your situation before starting a program and how to set up goals to meet with our extension's priorities and the college strategic plans. So the next step we want you to learn today is to start thinking and doing some program planning work for your program. As Jeff mentioned earlier, I hope, everyone is so excited right now, to hear about this part, because I'm actually very excited to want to, tell you about this. Because I'm going, actually to introduce you a very valuable tool for you to plan, develop, and evaluate your program. This tool is called a logic model, and it has been very popular in program development and evaluation world. It's also a very useful and helpful guide for all extension faculty members actually in the United States when we plan our programs. So before introducing you what a logic model is, let's look at together how a logic model serves the following forming purposes. So we will know why logic models can significantly improve our program planning and evaluation effectiveness. So the first purpose of a logic model is for your program planning. So a logic model is a bridge to connect the gap between where you are now and where you want to be. I think Jeff mentioned this earlier, and what your community or program expects you to be. So if you see the cartoon, like here on the right side, you really don't want the same thing in the cartoon to happen to you, right? Because when you completed your program and then you just realized what you have done was totally wrong, but it's too late for you to change anything, right? So to avoid this kind of thing happening, we must plan ahead. And a second purpose of a logic model is to help you with your evaluation, right? So a logic model can help you determine when and what to evaluate your program. And also a logic model can help you with your scholarly work for your tenure and promotion review. So, because with all the years I work with our extension, I know our extension faculty members work so hard every day, right? But have you ever asked yourself, how do you know the effort you have taken to your program is worthy? Or what research projects should you conduct for a publication from your program, right? If you have any of these questions, a good logic model can help you answer it. And thirdly, a logic model is a very good communication tool. It will create a simple and clear graphic representation when you talk to your stakeholders, program leaders, and colleagues about what you have done and what you plan to do. So for example, if you'd like to talk with me about your evaluation plan, it would be great if you may have your logic model ready. So I will know clearly what you think about your program. Then I will know, how I could help with your evaluation plan more effectively. So the last but not least, logic model serves as a management tool as well as a framework to help you track and monitor operations to better manage results in your program. So, when we create the logic model, it's not a one-time thing. You will need to go back frequently to check whether or not your program is on the right track and what you will need to do for a program improvement, okay? And here, I just read here, this very, very important point, because your individual extension plan, IEP, is built on the logic model. So if you go to your IEP page, you will see all the components in the logic model which require you to fill out. So for new faculty members, it might look very challenging to you. But don't worry, because I'm going to mention them one by one in today's training. And for our experienced faculty members, it will be a very great opportunity for you to check your current logic model and revise it for better program implementation. So what is a logic model? Logic model is a graphic representation, shows the logical relationships between the resources that go into a program, which we call inputs, the activities the program undertakes, we call outputs, and the changes or benefits that result from this program, we call the outcomes and impact. So there are the three main components in a logic model. So most people actually in extension, or other organizations, when they use logic model, they said a logic model looks like a roadmap, right? Because you have what you prepare and you take effort and you just, get what you expect, right? Fortunately. But in our Maryland extension, we really would like you to consider a logic model as a way of thinking, right? So when you write the logic model, it's actually not an actual work for you to submit it to your program leader every year or for you to finish your IEP, but it's a valuable tool for you to practice the new way of thinking when planning, developing, and evaluating your program. So this is a way of thinking we want you to have for your daily work, which will lead to your program improvement, your program success, and to fulfill the mission and expectation of our UME. And in our UME, actually logic model is a program planning model. So here, I want to show you, this is one just example because, you actually can design the logic model based on different formats, but this is, the one template we usually use to develop a logic model in our Maryland extension. So besides, the three main components I just mentioned, there are another three components. So a total of 6 components are included in the logic model. And the first, I think Jeff mentioned this, also. So, but I just want to add, a little more information here. So the first component of a logic model is your situation, right? You want to ask yourself, where are we now? So you want to identify issues, problems, and opportunities which might be addressed through your program, right? So actually, I want to show you 4 strategies how you actually write your situation statement. Think about your situation statement for your IEP, for your own program development. So first, you want to start a conversation with your stakeholders and the program leaders because they may know what existing issues and problems in your county or with your targeted population. And then you want to review existing sources, right, to find out the valuable and useful information to support your situation, such as strategic plans, grant applications, or sector data. But if there's no existing data you could find, or the information you find is not sufficient, you would like to conduct a needs assessment. So in our extension, actually, like by now, a lot of our faculty members have already conducted the needs assessment. So if you are new to it, or you have questions about that, please talk to your program leader or me, because we may have some examples and ideas, from like different program areas to help you start with your needs assessment. And then, so this is a baseline studies Jeff just mentioned about. So review theories and publish research. So in our evaluation and research world, we call this literature review, right? So literature review will help you set a baseline of your program outcome and impact. So you may compare your program's results with the baseline to say if your program has the true long-term outcomes and impact. Okay, so the next 2 components of a logic model are inputs and outputs. So inputs, they are the resources we will be invested to our programs, okay? So what resources are needed for our programs? And the outputs include 2 parts, activities and participation. So activities mean what we do, and participation means who we reach. So here, actually, it lists some examples for you to get familiar with these 2 components, and more examples you will find out when you fill out your IEP, because it will have the list of, the potential inputs and outputs for your own program area. So you could choose, from that list. Also, yeah, okay. So now, we actually, this slide actually can show you the most important component for a logic model, which is called outcomes and impact. So for outcomes, it has 3 levels. The first level is short-term outcomes, and then, the medium-term outcomes, and the highest level is the long-term outcomes. So the short-term outcomes are changes you expect to see immediately as a result of your program's activities. So usually you want to conduct research to find this outcome as soon as you finish your activities, okay? And also I want to point here is that, under the short-term outcomes, the first 4 outcomes, I'll use my laser pointer. So, here, the knowledge, attitudes, skills, aspirations, we call these 4 outcomes CASA. So, because I want you to remember this abbreviation because it will be very popular for, our development, program development and evaluation world when you do the logic model, okay? And then the medium-term outcomes are changes you expect to see as a result of achieving the short-term outcomes. So you usually want to conduct the research in 6 months to 2 years after the completion of your report. And these long-term outcomes, right? This one actually is about, what difference, what change you will make if your program is successful. So you usually want to conduct the research in 3 to 5 years after completion of your program. So here, under the long-term outcomes, there are 4 important outcomes. Here, economic, environment, social, and civic, and we call this SEEC, S-E-E-C, okay? So here, I want to say, because you see all the arrows here, so short-term outcomes lead to medium-term outcomes. Then medium-term outcomes leads to the long-term outcomes. Then leads to the impact. Vice versa, the impact and long-term outcomes will affect the medium-term and short-term outcomes. And, this is the chain of outcomes we always call, in a logic model. So outcomes from each phase can impact and build on each other. And also I want to mention here, because I give you the example, about the time phase, right, the timeline when you need to do the short-term, medium-term, and long-term outcomes, do the research to find out the short-term, those 3 time phase outcomes. But, this timeline I showed you here actually is just a general example. For most of the cases, we have for extension. However, you may adjust your timeline a little bit based on your own program, okay? So here, also I want to mention is that when you design your outcomes, there are 4 criteria for writing a good outcome: important, reasonable, realistic, and measurable. Especially for the long-term outcomes, because it takes years to complete. So it's the most difficult one to create. And when you create, you have to know when and where to stop your long-term outcomes, because you really don't want to write, a very, very broad long-term outcomes, or, this long-term outcomes you just, would never achieve, right? So the 4 criteria here are the guide to help you with your outcome writing and design. And here, I just really, because I think this is very important, for you to actually learn about this, because a lot of people actually thought these 2 terms, long-term outcomes and impact, were interchangeable. But actually before this training, when Jeff and I discussed about this, we really think these 2 should be separate, okay? So the long-term outcomes are the changes regarding the target group's SEEC conditions, right? We just learned the SEEC, right? What it stands for. and impact is the desired changes at the societal level. So in our extension, we call this the public value of extension, right? So usually we want to ask a so what question to find out the impact of our program from the long-term outcomes. So here, because Priscilla is here, and we actually just work on, her program. So I really want to borrow Priscilla's financial education for reentry program with prisoners here, as a example, because I just feel like, this is a very classic example I can put here for people to, learn about the differences between long-term outcomes and impact. So, and thank you very much, Priscilla. And the long-term outcome is inmates' economic conditions have been improved, right? And then, I just really want to ask myself, so, I already knew the long-term outcomes. What difference, what change will my program make at the societal level, okay? So as a program planner, I hope the inmates' re-entry into society will be successful, right? So what will happen if, this is successful, right? Because it will help reduce the recidivism in my county, right? So this is impact, we put here, which is the recidivism rate has reduced in my county. So I hope, just based on this example, you can see the difference between long-term outcomes and impact here. And Jeff, would you like to share some of your experience or thoughts about this?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Actually, I'll kind of expand on one that relates to the recidivism piece. Over the course of my career, I'm 33 years now with Extension, and there was a targeted time where in the 4-H youth development program, we did a good amount of work with the juvenile justice system. There was a targeted grant that was available for that. Many, many states around the nation had the good fortune to partner with them on that. But what I want to draw attention to is that well, in simplistic terms, as a county agent, I would go start a 4-H club at the Juvenile Justice Center. That we would start a 4-H group, and the kids would come in and they would be part of 4-H. And the kids would participate in a wide variety of projects. At the end of that, there may be some outcomes that we would have that include, maybe, or it could have been culinary skills or something like that. But the outcome was, maybe the kids had a skill that would make them employable. We did junior master gardener as an example, so they were able to get jobs in the nursery industry. They had skill development themselves and so forth, et cetera. So there were a number of positive outcomes that we could attribute based on survey with them, pre and post and so forth, to see that their skill set included or increased and so forth. But the big impact, as was mentioned here, is among those young people who were incarcerated, the least rate of recidivism, meaning those that were repeat offenders and had to be put back into the juvenile justice system, it was the least rate of recidivism was among those young people that participated in 4-H. So that impact was significant at the societal level, because on a variety of scales, and as they come out, just as Priscilla's doing and Michael and others, as they come out in an adult setting, but as they come out, they're better set from an economic perspective because of their financial management skills. So perhaps they won't make the decision to reoffend, steal, whatever led them into that situation. Another one was, I'll pick on Tom Hudson over on the Eastern Shore. He's in Talbot County, but it's another 4-H connected one. But Tom would do this program related to career readiness, and he was very deliberate based on his assessment, based on what he knew about his county and so forth. He was very deliberate about doing a career workforce readiness program that concentrated in the healthcare industry, because what they observed was that the average median income was higher in Talbot County among individuals that worked in the healthcare profession. And so the implication of that was that as the kids went through that type of an experience and so forth, and if in fact they made the decision based on the outcomes of his program to go into a healthcare related career, their earning potential went up, their purchasing power is greater, their contribution to the tax base is greater, and that at the societal level helped the county on a broader scale. Another example, again, it might be years though before you see that, so it becomes a challenge. And this is just an area where we often have folks say, I wouldn't say that we get confused, it's just more that that impacts just take longer to reach. And so when you hear any of us, including me and others, say, well, what impact did you make? You're like, well, man, I am trying hard. Well, of course you are, and you're doing great things, and there's great outcomes and so forth. But we'll see the outcomes much more readily than we will the societal level impacts, where we made any kind of a statistically significant change, positive change against a concern or an issue that we had in our state.
Thank you, Jeff. And also, I want to add one point, because I think Jeff mentioned this in his previous slide. And because for our extension educators, the funding and grants are very important to our work too. So, but the reality is that the funding and grant resources are becoming more limited and much more competitive. So you will have to show the impact of your work to be able to get the money. The programs have focused on documenting evidence of its impact will be the ones that receive funding and continue to exist. So when you design your logic model, we really hope you may keep the impact in your mind and start creating your logic model from the impact. So that's, actually Jeff mentioned earlier, why we really want you to keep impact in mind, right? So how could we keep the impact in mind, when design the logic model or implement your program? Actually, there are 6 questions I really want you to always ask yourself, to just, practice how you actually can keep the impact in your mind when you design your program. So the first question is, what is the current situation that you intend to impact? So the impact of program is linked to the situation that you are seeking to help improve. So if you still remember the 4 strategies we just talked about earlier to help you find your program situation, actually those 4 strategies also may help you find your impact of your program. So when you figure out your situation, right, and what will it look like when you achieve the desired situation or outcome? What behaviors need to change for that outcome to be achieved? And what knowledge or skills do people need before the behavior will change? What activities need to be performed to cause the necessary learning? And what resources will be required to achieve the designed outcome, okay? So as I mentioned earlier, a logic model looks like a roadmap. So you will have to do, the hard work step by step when you design and develop your program. But at the same time, it's very important to keep the impact in your mind, right? So you will be successful for your program planning and implementation, and your hard work will be paid off. So here, there are the last 2 components of a logic model, assumptions and external factors. So assumptions, they are the beliefs we have about the program and the people involved and the way we think the program will work. So for example, as today's training, take today's training as an example, okay? So if this is my evaluation program, so my assumptions for this program will be extension faculty members, you guys will be very motivated to attend the training. And the knowledge learned from this training will affect the behavior change, okay? So there are, only my assumptions. There are no research evidence to support that. So I will need to conduct research to prove them. And the other definition is the external factors. So they're the factors we just, we just have little or, actually no control about. So, for example, I have some examples here. So like culture, economy, politics, climate, social policies, demographic patterns, change in city, county, state, or federal laws, change in UMEs or the funding organizations' policies and priorities, or, changes in leadership and so on. So those factors, we cannot control, right? So actually, when we actually have, if those factors happen in your program, you really want to, sometimes go back to adjust your logic model, right? The program development plan, right? But when you actually want to do any adjustments, there is a tip for you. Don't actually change your long-term outcomes or impact at this moment, right? You could, do the adjustments in like output, input. Like I can change, the in-person trainings to the webinars trainings, or I can. Oh, I'm sorry to pause there because I just saw Jackie is coming, so I'm so glad, because she will bring, a lot of good experience and opinions from the tenure and the promotion perspective. So I just admitted her. So, okay, so, yeah, so if, some external factors happen in your program and don't change the long-term outcomes and the impact, because you really don't know what happened in years, right? So you want to actually change the rest of the components, such as like, for example, I just mentioned like from the in-person trainings to webinars, or, you want to change your target population to another group, or even you want to change your short-term outcomes, but, just at this moment, don't change your long-term outcomes and your impact of your program, because that is your goal, right? That's, the thing you actually want to achieve in the future. Okay, so when we design the logic model, we also want to consider these two, assumptions, external factors, those two components when we design our logic model. All right. So now, if you already came up with your logic model, how could we test the logic model, whether or not it's good or bad? There are two ways, for us to test a logic model. You could use the forward logic from left to right, uses if-then statements, okay? So here, this is, like my draft of my logic model, my evaluation program, like today's training, like I just take this as example and then, create this logic model. So my inputs, right, are the necessary resources. So for example, like technology expertise, content expertise, and time. And then, if I have the necessary resources, then, right, we can use, the resources to design and deliver a webinar to our educators. And if we design this webinar to our educators, then our educators will learn about, the logic model skills, right, and knowledge. And if they learn the knowledge, then, they will use the logic models in their programming, right? If they use the logic model in their programming, then educators' programming will be improved and the evaluation resources will be used wisely. And then, right, it will lead to the impact of my program. So also, there is another way for you to test the logic model, which is called reverse logic. It's from right to left. So you want to ask yourself, but how questions, right? So if I have the impact, over there, so I want to ask, how could I reach, this impact? So then you can come up with the long-term outcomes, right? And then you want to ask yourself, how can I make, these long-term outcomes, be true? And then, you can just, come up with the medium-term outcomes, and then short-term outcomes, and then outputs, and then inputs. Okay, so actually this is just, this graph here actually shows you how the logical relationships we just mentioned earlier in a logic model works. Okay, so now, you already create and tested your logic model. And if you want to start your evaluation plan based on your logic model, you want to ask you two questions. The first one is, what do you want to know? Okay, so this question can lead you to the key evaluation questions. And for inputs and outputs, all the key evaluation questions, we call them process questions. And for the outcomes impact, we call those questions outcome questions. Okay, so also, after you come up with your key evaluation questions, and you want to ask you the second question, how will you know it? Because this question can, give you the evidence we call indicators to answer your key evaluation questions. So usually there are two types of indicators. One is called quantitative indicators, so such as number, percentage, and the other type we call qualitative indicators, right? So they're kind of like self-reported confidence, like people's perceptions or observation. So here, I just really want to mention one very important point, which is that although the quantitative indicators shows here, as number or percentage, it doesn't mean that listing the number or percentage is a way for you to report your outcomes. Especially, for the numbers. For example, if you would like to see the change of your participants as the short-term outcomes, right? Their learning outcomes. So your indicator is the percentage or number of participants who gain the knowledge. But your outcomes will be whether or not your participants have increased their knowledge after attending your program, right? So because of that, you really want to calculate the percentage increase, or you want to use some statistical analysis to find out your program's outcomes. So at this moment, maybe some of you just wondering what I was just talking about. It's totally fine, because if you have any questions about the research design and methods, we may schedule a meeting to talk about that later. However, my point here is that if you only list the number or percentage in your outcomes, the impact of your program would be weak. You want to focus on your participants and the program's change, okay? So here, I just really want to show you this example, how I can integrate, or how we can integrate evaluation portion into a logic model. So here, the first part, actually, I just showed you as an example earlier. This is my logic model, right? So then I want to ask my first question. What do I want to know based on my logic model, like each component, right? So the first three for inputs and outputs, they are the process questions, right? So for resources, I want to know what resources were invested in the program, right? And for the activities, we want to know, to what extent were activities implemented as planned. And, for the participation, you guys, UME extension educators, I want to know who have we reached with the program, okay? And for the short-term outcomes, the key evaluation question, what I want to know, based on the short-term outcomes I have here is that, to what extent did the knowledge increase? And for medium-term, key evaluation question are participants actually using improved skills? If they use, so what? Okay. And for the long-term key evaluation questions are, has there been an improvement in program plan and design? Have they conducted effective evaluations? Okay. So based on all these key evaluation questions, I want to ask myself the second question. How will you know, right? So this will lead you to build up some indicators to answer your key evaluation questions. So for example, for my first inputs, my indicators will be number hours when delivered. And for my activities, is number sessions hold. And for my participation will be number percentage attended. And for my short term, the learning outcomes will be number percentage with increased knowledge of logic model, evaluation, developing evaluation plan. And medium term, indicators, this behavior change, actions, this outcome, the indicators will be number, percentage, create logic models and evaluation plans, right? And then, for this long term, the conditions, these outcomes, my indicators will be one, quantitative indicator will be number or percentage effective programs and evaluation projects. And then, there will be another indicator for the qualitative, indicator as a qualitative indicator will be perceptions from program leaders about the improvement on program design and evaluation plans. So this is the example I really want you to say, so when you design your logic model, you really want to integrate, the key evaluation questions and indicators into your logic model. So here, because these two terms, these two components, outputs and outcomes, for extension, for our extension people, I feel, it's very easy for people to get confused. So I really want to point out the difference between these two components here. So outputs are activities we do or accomplish that help achieve outcomes. And outcomes are the changes resulting from a program's outputs. So as we said earlier, right, the indicators of outputs are number or percentage. And the indicators of outcomes are the program change, what difference, what changes will your program make to your targeted population. So if you only add up the number of workshops or participants each year to reach a total number of the workshops or participants for your program and put that into your outcomes, although the number may look so beautiful, it's thousands or more than that, it looks really good, it's not the outcomes. Okay, again, the outcomes are the changes, are the differences, your program makes among your program's outputs, among your program's targeted population. Okay, here, because now we already learned how to design a logic model and the first two steps, how to develop an evaluation plan. After finding the key evaluation questions and indicators, you've already done with the half of your evaluation plan, right? You can see, this graph on the left side of my slide. So next, you will need to find the appropriate research methods and collect data. So I think today's training, could be a very, useful guide for you to start or check your logic model and start thinking about your evaluation plan. And also, I highly recommend this evaluation plan worksheet. Actually, I just took the screenshot and then put that here as an example. And also, I will put it in the Google Drive folder where I just sent to you guys after this training, because it will help you think through what you would like to evaluate. And if you want to schedule a meeting with me to talk about your program and evaluation after you create your logic model, okay? So, it will be very helpful for us to start our conversation. So this actually is all I have for today. And I know, it has a lot of information, but if you have any questions, because your program leaders are here and Jackie is here. Jackie, I just mentioned you to our audience because, if you have anything you want to add, from the tenure and the promotion perspective, please, welcome to jump in and add it, okay? And so you have Jackie, Jeff, me here, and your colleagues mentor, and some colleagues, some people here, actually they are mentors. So, if you need any help in the future, just come to us, and talk with us, and we would like to help you with that, okay? So I really could not see the chat box. So let me just stop sharing my screen. So is there any questions you have here?
Chenzi, we do, and it relates directly to the conversation here. So Debbie's reached out and said, oh goodness, now it went away, but it was basically, how do you calculate, if in fact you're measuring if you're measuring change in knowledge and skill, how is that calculated? So I'm going to let you take a breath, and I'm going to answer what I have from my perspective. And then I had a couple of additional thoughts before we transition into the other section, but then we'll come back and see if you have anything to add. So the question's been raised about reporting or calculating the change. So when you, again, you don't evaluate everything, you don't do a survey for everything and so forth. It's just these major programs typically, unless, you know, you're doing something that you really do want to see if in fact what either your presentation or your series or whatever it is that you presented has changed the person's knowledge. So that's when, I'm so glad this question came forward, because this is another thing where we have to think ahead, that are we going to do a survey at the beginning of the process? And then let's say we did 6 workshops, and at the end of the 6, we presented the same survey, and then we saw what the answer was there. So let's say the question was leadership skills. And at the time, the people rated themselves, maybe their confidence about leadership skills at, say, 50%. But then at the conclusion, your 6 series of whatever you presented, they put it at 75%. So, you know, the more straightforward way is, well, I went from, there was a 25% increase in their knowledge and skills associated with leadership. At first it was 50, and then they rated themselves 75. Now, when then you get into, it becomes more difficult, is maybe you have a higher skill set group that has come to you anyway, and maybe they rate their knowledge level pretty well up there, and then you come and you do a 6 workshop series, and they rate themselves pretty close to where they were. And so it gets frustrating, because you're like, wow, I did all these 6 workshops, and they measured themselves at the beginning at 75%, and now at the end, we're only at 76%. So I only had a 1% increase in their confidence or knowledge of leadership skills. But the thing is, this is where Chenzi can help you ahead of time, because when you get that level of concentration, it becomes quite statistically significant when, in fact, people, even though it's a small number, that doesn't mean it's not a meaningful number. But you have to think ahead and make sure that you design an instrument that you're able to measure that statistical significant part. So I would say the vast majority of us aren't walking experts about that by any means. So that's why we have a position such as Chenzi has with us that can work with us to design that. But that's the short answer to that. And then Chenzi, we'll look back in a second. But I did want to draw attention to a couple of things. One is, as was mentioned, Jackie was kind enough to hop on in the next section when we're speaking about scholarship. She's going to join me and give some reflection as it relates to promotion and tenure and the significance of impacts. So we'll be hearing from her in just a bit. We also, I did want to give a couple of more examples as it relates to these long-term impacts. So as there was, I mentioned Debbie earlier in the great question. The other thing is, for instance, all of our program areas, I've mentioned a variety of different more subject matter areas and so forth, but like our Lead Maryland program is an example. So there are constituents from around the state that are accepted into the Lead Maryland program. They go through almost, multiple months of leadership training and so forth. And so in the short term, they could probably measure some difference among the skill sets in them. But from a societal level perspective, sometimes it's challenging to recognize the impacts of that, because even though they went through our leadership program that the organization has, say in 2020, maybe it's not until 2030 and they run for mayor of their community, or they're president of the Farm Bureau, or the State Farm Bureau, or they run for state office, or and so forth. So the impact of that may not be realized for a while. And we see that in 4-H as another example. So being mindful of that, though, helps us when we think about these big long-term plans about what effect do we intentionally mean to have. Another light example that I have comes from my days as when I was an agricultural agent. but I was very closely connected with the Master Gardener program. I actually, when I was in graduate school, worked on the original Master Gardener program. I was a grad assistant in that department, and all of that was developed at Texas A&M. So when I became an ag agent, it just made sense that I would introduce that into the county. And it was identified to us, we lived in the coastal area, San Patricio County, which is outside of Corpus Christi. And the county came to us and was very concerned about the landfill that was there and the volume of discarded trash and so forth that has to go into it, and the water table and all kinds of things. It would be very difficult for us to make an effective measure of us maybe extending the life of the landfill. But as an organization, there were a number of things that we could do to educate the general public. So a light example is we began to participate in the Don't Bag It program. Our master gardeners worked with us to massively concentrate on that as a large-scale program to decrease the volume of grass clippings that were going to the landfill. There were some other things that were happening. Here's, you know, we speak about people like abusing chemicals around. Some of us folks as homeowners probably are the most guilty of that, because you're like, oh, if it calls for 10 pounds of fertilizer, let's put 20. My yard will be twice as green and pretty. And so they, you know, they there's a lot of pesticide use is the point. And so the intentional education of homeowners to help them to better understand how to manage their turf and so forth can be very significant over the course of time and lead to some impacts. But in this specific example, the goal was that they would leave their lawn clippings, they would stop bagging them. This wasn't isolated to my county, we were doing it all over the state. And because they were decreasing the volume of grass clippings that were going to the landfill, it extended the life of the landfill. And we were then able, because the little grass clippings break down and they put the nutrients back into the soil. And so people had to, theoretically, you would use less fertilizer. And quite frankly, it was easier to mow the grass because you weren't able to take that big thing off and dump those clippings into a bag and all that. So anyway, don't bag it. So the big picture impact was potentially extending the landfill, but we did a series of programs that contributed toward that. So I just thought of a couple of other examples when I had the good fortune to pause for a minute that would draw attention to some of the other program areas that we have. Chenzi, did you want to expand any more on that question about how to report or calculate the change in before and after questions?
Well, actually, because probably we'll have another training to talk about that, but we actually have a worksheet, you know, to teach you how to calculate the percentage change. So I'm going to send you guys, you know, this worksheet, and you know, it just gave you like very clear introduction about what it is and how you actually calculate by you know, like, you know, Excel, or you know, it's just bio calculator or something. So I'm going to send you this worksheet.
Hey, Jeff, this is Jackie. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I was about to say, I just saw in the chat that Jeff wanted to hop in, so I'll mute and you go.
So I'm sorry if it's loud. I'm underneath the baggage pickup or something at the airport. I just wanted to kind of challenge something that Chenzi had said about outcomes, although now that you're offering up a spreadsheet to show percentages, that when we're looking at promotion and tenure, when we're putting together promotion dossiers, we are looking at numbers. We are looking at numbers of outcomes. We are looking at how that percentage change happened in the outcomes. So the one example that was shown was youth between the ages of 6 and 12 are more confident or whatever as an outcome. I believe in the P&T world that would be considered a very weak outcome without some type of percentage in front of it. That 75% of the kids this page met this outcome or are exhibiting this outcome based on post evaluations. So I just wanna, and I know when I talk about doing dossier prep and doing that part of an extension CV, is that I talk about taking those narrative sentences and making sure that there is some type of quantitative number there, whether it is a percentage that is used, then it is then calculated based on the number of participants in your class, etc. But it's not just a generic statement where people would start questioning, well, what does that really mean? Did somebody really get that data? How many people were in that program and whatnot? So I encourage people to make sure they put those numbers there because it makes it a much more solid packet. So just gonna throw that out there.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. And it's as so much of our program, or so many of our big P programs, as mentioned, that have the potential for impacts may not come for 10 or 20 years and so forth. It's an excellent point that Jackie raises in that, but in the interim, it may be needed and we may be expected to present information about how that has positively affected. So as such, there are times in our career where we may not have the significant answer at that specific point, but we realize if we keep on, we'll reach there. But what we often do is you have to ask yourself the question, what is the societal implication of the work that we're doing? And you may have to draw on maybe literature, other partners that have done similar things to demonstrate that this is what happened when they did similar things, because we're not there yet, as an example. So it takes a village for us all to get through. I'm so glad that came up because it's not just about, you know, your raw numbers, and then at the end, it's not just a percentage, it's all of these things come together, and then for us to be able to, you know, some of it is theory. It's like theoretically, my example of the landfill, I don't know that we would ever get out there and measure the landfill and say that my Don't Bag It program, you know, decreased the exact, theoretically, that's what would happen. So that's a great point. So let's, whoops, okay, I'm going to transition back to share screen, and we are going to move back in with, the reason I'm stammering around is I'm trying to find the right thing to share. I believe that that's it. I say trans, we've done that. So
Yeah.
let's move on to our next piece. Now, why isn't that going? Okay, there we go. We did want to just wrap up. This is our last section before you transition to your program leaders. Again, Chenzi is going to copy and paste their rooms into the chat, and then you can just grab it, copy it, go put it into a new browser, and then, you know, go over to there. It's just like, you know, you've done with everything else. I do want to remind folks, I had some great questions that came in. I recognize some people might have hopped on after we spoke to this, but I'll just reiterate, we will be sending to you, everyone that registered, we will be sending to you a PDF of our slides. We'll also send a link to the recording. We've referenced now 4 or 5 documents that we will be providing to you that we maybe gave a snippet of in a slide, but we'll send you those entire pieces. They'll either be Word or PDF documents that come to you. Furthermore, as we're doing with all of our webinars as we move forward, is we will post those onto our, it's the original UME answers. Under that, for this particular related things on program planning and so forth, they're going under staff and faculty affairs that Jackie has pulled together. And then there's a section on planning. And so these, our webinar will be there along with the supported pieces that we've been speaking to, but it'll go directly to your email box since you're special because you registered and you were here with us. So we appreciate that, and that'll come directly to you. I just did quickly want to touch on a few things related to scholarly contribution as it relates to impacts. As a professional faculty member, whether you're professional track or whether you're on tenure track and so forth, there's a series of expectations that we all have. And so one of those, of course, is conducting programs that lead to impacts and the outcomes that we've been mentioning. And depending on your role with the organization, that may look different. And depending on your role with the organization, the subject matter concentration you have, or the big program that you offer, they may be more easily measured, as an example, than some of the other areas and so forth. So none of that is missed on us. But the thing I did want to draw attention to as it relates to impacts is, I wanted to reiterate that in extension programming, you don't necessarily do a survey or an evaluation for every single thing you do. It's typically that maybe you have three, I'll pick on myself. So I have three major kind of programmatic areas. One is employee development, as an example. So as a former state 4-H program leader, I had a number of faculty that reported to me. I supported them. We worked cooperatively together on a variety of scales. So in my mind, the things that I did, so much of that was related to the support of faculty and staff within my program area and so forth. So many, many things I did surrounded that. I also do a good amount of work in international programming, particularly with youth, and historically I've done that. So that's another big area that I work in. And the other is in access, equity, and belonging, and or we focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, within the college. But I do a lot of work with LGBTQ youth, as an example. So when I do surveying, evaluations, and so forth, it's typically within those three major areas. Those are the big programs that I've concentrated around and so forth. So that's what I would concentrate on. So you don't have to survey everything that we do large-scale evaluations on everything we do, but you do need to think ahead on these big programs that you're doing, that you're looking to get large-scale impacts around. You absolutely have to be intentional about planning to evaluate those, just as we've been speaking about, and putting together an effective evaluation plan as part of that. So that's where Chenzi can become helpful. Your program leader will be very helpful with that as well. With that noted, as a professional university faculty member, it is an expectation that if you are planning an evaluation that is to be published, that you're planning to present on at national meetings, but in particularly around publishing, then you have to get Institutional Review Board approval to do that. That is a whole workshop in and of itself, but I did want to give a quick nod to that, that there are components, and they're asked, just as a light example, I submitted a professional journal article just yesterday that they wanted the IRB number. And so had I not done that, then I would not have been able to submit that journal article into that journal. And so we see that. So just as a slight nod. We also wanted to speak to literature reviews. Rachel Bear gets a gold star. I'm going to speak to that real quickly in a second. And then I do want to move to what I call the scholarship circle, and Jackie's going to hop back in to reiterate more intentionally about the significance of the impacts as it relates to the promotion and tenure program. So very quickly, I want to speak to IRB, seek for major research and scholarship. You know, as a, it's just a core expectation. If you go through the ethics training and so forth, all of that's covered when we have to cover that. About the reason I'm doing that is I'm having to move my screen around so I can read that. Required for research faculty intending to publish, often asked by journals, major expectation of us as an academic institution. We mentioned about literature reviews, all of this, there is support there at our library. This person, Stephanie, oh my gosh, I did a poor job copying her last name over, but don't pay, there's actually a full sheet that we're emailing you that gives all of the detail here. But this position at the library is there to help us with lit reviews. So there's a process that you fill out, and this individual will help to search for similar research programs that were conducted, the outcomes, and you could possibly draw on those as you're thinking about your survey design, your program design, and so forth. She's very, this position is tremendously helpful, and often I recognize that folks don't realize that as a faculty member that that's available to you. So you'll have a full sheet of, it's got all the detail that they put together, and she's come to some of our program areas when we have our retreats and so forth. She'll come and she will actually spend time with us. So this is, I mentioned about Rachel Bear. She's in Frederick County, and I said she gets a gold star because when Rachel came to work with us, with her, she shared this, she actually presented this at a similar training for us. She just sat down as a new faculty member and began to think out and to map out where she wanted to be by the time she went up for tenure, which was 5 years. And so that then led to what programs do she need to design, what, as you'll note here, she's got some inputs, she's mapped out her activities, what are the short-term outcomes that she hopes to accomplish, and then what will her research approach be? And then over on the far right, it's about what scholarship would that lead to? So she has to measure, she has to evaluate, she's leading toward impacts. It's just a light example of, again, this is a logic model. It's a logical flow, but she also used that to kind of map out a plan of action to keep herself moving forward as it related to her scholarship interests. So that's available. She has shared it widely, so you can reach out to her, but that was part of a training that we had before. So the next to last thing I have is just giving nod to the impacts of scholarships to underscore one about promotion, and Jackie's going to hop in and speak to that, and then I'm going to wrap up with my scholarship circle example. But also, as an organization, we have to prove our worth. We have to show, as an organization that receives federal, state, and county dollars, along with private funds through grants and so forth, that we have measurable outcomes and impacts that the organization has to positively affect a concerning issue in our state. So we have to prove our worth. So all of us have to demonstrate that we have meaningful outcomes and impacts for the programs that we carry out. I mentioned about faculty achievement reports, there's nods to that. And of course, we do annual impact statements. That's a whole other workshop next month that we're offering, and so you're welcome to hop in on that. Jackie, at this point, I'm gonna mute, so maybe you can hop in and just expand on the significance of impacts as it relates to promotion.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can, go ahead.
Okay, great. So just a few things I just wanted to add kind of quickly, touch on points that you had originally just made. IRB is a tool for scholarship. IRB itself is not scholarship. I see that a lot. That shows up on people's CVs. And it is a question we actually took to the provost's office. And IRB is doing an IRB. Yes, we all know it's a ton of work, but it is just a tool for us to do our work. And so it is not considered a scholarly piece of work, and it is not to go on a CV. Now, I tell people, if you created a huge survey, it's something you did for a program, it's an output, listed as an output. At least put it somewhere. And then in regard to scholarship itself, one of the big questions that I get and I hear a lot is that in our department, we are encouraged to work as teams, but we are evaluated individually. And so when we work in teams, that can become problematic in how do you document what your work is and who is doing what. And so, and I always give Patsy Ezel the nod to this because I sat through one of her in-services years ago. And I think it's really important when you're working in a team right from the very beginning, as you're doing your program planning, as you're creating your logic models, that along the way you're thinking, okay, at this point in time, I should be doing a poster at my national conference. I should be then doing, or we as a team should be doing a presentation at this conference. These are scholarly pieces. It's not just about, it's not just about journal articles. You could probably ask a lot of those of us in Extension who have been here for a number of years. Many of us were promoted with tenure with no journal articles. Journal articles aren't the top piece of scholarship that at the time most of us did. It is recognition at your national level, doing conferences, presentations, doing poster presentations, writing grants, etc. So remember, there's everything else in there along with fact sheet development and publications. But as you're developing that with your team, it is really important as a team to decide who's going to take leadership in which aspect of your pieces of scholarship and how that scholarship will be documented. So it's really important that as a team, you are coming up with what the citation looks like and you're sharing that citation across the team and that everybody is using the same citation. And some people might think, well, it's not a big deal, nobody's gonna notice. And you're probably right 97% of the time, but we have seen situations in a review where we've had multiple people being reviewed with the same citation and the citation looks different. And so what that calls into play is the review committee now has to question which faculty member is, telling us the truth, because how things are listed is usually in order of how much work was put in or who put the most amount of work in. So when you're thinking about scholarship, especially when you're working as a team, right up in front, decide who's going to do what. And remember that when you are doing things like national conferences, my team we're really good about this. We do lots of things, and most of us, only one or two of us go to a conference. If you're writing an abstract that gets peer reviewed for a conference presentation, everybody on your team's name goes on that abstract, and that abstract, if it gets accepted, goes into everybody's CV. But the individual who goes to the conference, stands up at the conference and does the presentation, the presentation part of that is the only thing that goes in that person's scholarship, or CV. The presentation itself does not go into the rest of the team members' CV, because the team members didn't get up and actually do the presentation. So they're two different products. An abstract and a presentation are two different products. And yes, the team may have helped develop the PowerPoint, and that's an output. The team may have helped with gathering the data, but the presentation itself is the actual product, and the person standing up and taking the questions from their peers is the actual product. And that was a big question we've had over the last couple of years, and a question that was clarified by the provost 2 years ago for us. So I think those are the big things I wanted to point out. I don't know if anybody has any other questions, or I'll let you just go on from there, Jeff.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. As is noted, I appreciate the reiteration of some of the points, and in particular, the expanding of how the evaluation and the outcomes and the impacts and so forth are then put into a practical structure that affects all of us. As I mentioned, proving our worth and making us competitive to be accepted to give presentations and articles and all of that. But of course, again, you have to plan for those impacts to be able to have those measures in order to create a rigor that is recognized and is strong, that then would be probably, it's more probable that you would be accepted and be available, be made available to give those presentations and so forth. And so with that noted, that's the last slide that we have here before folks transition over to their program leaders. Again, Chenzi's going to put that in the chat. I can't see the chat, so maybe it's already in there, but I did want to draw attention to, I call it the scholarship circle. Now, Jackie, you can't see this, but I personally did not have the skill set to build the circle and insert everything I wanted, but I did find a graphic that has like 9, I can't even do math, so there are 12, yep, that does add to 12 circles. But the reason I draw attention to this, so I'm just going to use my cursor. I would just, when I do mentoring conversations, or I did onboarding conversations with new faculty, we would put a big, a sheet of paper out, and I would just draw a circle, and we would speak about all the points on the circle that relate to scholarship. But the reason I'm drawing attention to it now is that we have to be intentional about measuring and evaluating so that we have those outcomes, measured outcomes, with a targeted goal of impacts. And so if we're not working toward that, then it's going to be very challenging to be successful as we think about making an intentional positive outcome toward a concerning point that we have in our state. So very quickly, I'm just going to use my cursor, but I'm going to pick on this upper right corner scholarship circle. So conversationally, as I would tell people to think about, again, you're not going to evaluate everything, you're not going to measure everything, but when you think about scholarship, my encouragement, just as I gave the examples of the big 3 things that I work in, that I would report in my CV, the extension section, those are the big 3 sections. So I identify, as with you, a concern, an issue. If I were a county-based educator, it may be that I did an assessment, I found baseline data, I worked with folks to be able to find out what those big concerns were in my community. It aligned well with the priorities and the initiatives that the organization and the college has. Plus, I'm personally interested in it. I want to thrive in that area. So I call that a 3-fer. my gosh, I got a threefer. There's something I'm excited about. It's a concern in my county or my city, and it's a priority that the organization has. So I'm going to full court press against that. Some of that is more easily defined because we may have been hired into a position that's very specific, you know, to a particular area. But if our position is more broad, then you might be able to design that yourself. But that concern and issue. So I know what the issue is, and I want to do something about it. So I design a program, a big P program. I may do multiple small P things, multiple presentations, workshops, series of things under that to reach my long-term goals and outcomes and hopefully some impacts. But I'm going to design that, and that's the logic model that that Chenzi was kind enough to demonstrate for us. So on this circle, I'm starting up here in the right-hand corner, there's an issue. Then I'm coming down here and I'm saying, this is what I'm going to do about it. And I'm designing all of that. That's a whole curricular process of curriculum design, presentations, fact sheets, whatever it is that you need to do. I'm also, though, the reason I speak to that is the next little thing on this circle, if I were to type that in, would have been that, and I have to make a deliberate, intentional plan to evaluate that so that I will have those measurable, positive, hopefully positive implications. Along the way, I'm doing teaching effectiveness to see if I'm getting the points across that I hope that I am, and all of those types of things that we need to work on. And then I continue to move on this circle around. My cursor keeps hiding from me. But so down here, I've evaluated that. I've done a very intentional thing. I've gotten IRB approval. Chenzi has helped me with the survey design. I have the results, and then what? Well, that's where, as Jackie's drawn attention to, that gives us the information and the concentration that, dang, what's happening to that cursor? Here it is. So back on the scholarship circle, it comes back to that's where I would concentrate on doing proposals for professional presentations, for posters, journal articles that were mentioned. I would concentrate on fact sheets around that, things that really lead also that eventually then I begin to develop a national reputation. So that's a long-term goal that many folks, particularly those on tenure track or that are tenured and then they're looking to promote to full professor, national reputation is a component of that. So because I've concentrated on a big P program, I've become renowned for that. I'm very intentional. It's identified at a concerning point. I've designed a program around it. I've evaluated that so that I can measure and demonstrate the long-term outcomes that lead to impacts. And that's the thing that I'm sharing with my colleagues. I'm pushing that out in a variety of ways, and I've become renowned because I've developed an expertise in that area, and that's what I'm concentrating my scholarship on. So that's the circle. So if it was drawn out, it all comes together, full circle, and all of these presentations then inform others in other states or within my state, and then those folks can then begin to address that issue because of the things that they've learned from me, as an example. So that's the scholarship circle real quickly. So many thanks to you for joining. This is our contact information. Just start typing our names and it'll probably pop in your email box. But again, to underscore, we will be emailing all of this out. We will be putting it online and so forth. Greatly appreciate everyone joining. Chenzi, I'm going to stop sharing so that I can, let me just make sure that here's the Zoom room, sorry. Don't expect you to copy that down. Again, it's in the chat. So I'm going to stop sharing so that as we sign off, the chat will actually show up for me. So with that, we're going to stop our side. I hope you packed a lunch. I always say we planned for 2 hours, and yet I'm not exactly sure how much more each program leader has, but they'll be able to get more specific with you and so forth as it relates to the specific subject matter area. So I appreciate the kind words that people have put down in the chat. So with that, I'll allow everyone to take a breath, find those other rooms, and hop over. Take care, everyone.
Jeff, we have to stop the recording.
Okay, thanks for that. You've helped keep me straight.
You're welcome.
All right. Take care, everyone.